Welcome to Geek View Tavern, where smart folks engage in loose talk about the geeky movies, TV shows, and comics you love. Remember to like the video, share it with friends, and let us know how we're doing in the comments section. In this episode, we pull out the bar stool for Hogan's Alley magazine publisher and editor Tom Heinches as we raise a toast to the rich history of newspaper comic strips and the business of cartooning. Okay, Skeeter, hit the intro. Welcome to Geek View Tavern, where smart people get involved in loose talk. And speaking of loose talkers, there's my friend Tom Heinches. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
How are you?
You consider me a smart person. Thank you.
Not only a smart person, but one of my favorite people that I ever got involved with in my career, and the one that's responsible for my really wonderful nickname that I've kept all these years. You gave me that nickname when?
Duo.
There you go. It would have been 1985.
85, I think. Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah. And then also at the end of the bar, as always, the lovely Mr. Tom Mason. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Dave. Hi, other Tom.
So the three of us worked together at Fantagraphics. Tom and I worked on Amazing Heroes mostly. You worked on the Comics Journal, and then we all went our separate ways. And you ended up creating a magazine called Hogan's Alley.
I did.
So tell our lovely
listeners,
customers. I'm not. If you accidentally drift into Geek View Tavern, I'm not sure what I call you besides friend. I don't know. Anyway, tell our friends what's the deal with Hogan's Alley.
As you say, I left the Comic Journal and I left Fantagraphics in 1986. I loved my time there. Really proud of the work I did. But you guys probably recall what kind of money we made there.
Well, you know my story, right? I had to leave because I could get a raise. I could make way more money and get health insurance if I worked at Domino's Pizza.
At some point, reality sets in and you want to make some real money. You have to give up doing what you love, but, adulting is hard, right?
It is indeed.
I left Fantagraphics in 86. I stayed in touch with Rick Marshall, who had worked on Nemo and many book projects with Fantagraphics. We stayed in touch and we talked about what we wanted to see in a comics magazine that was not currently being produced.
Right. Well, what was Nemo? I mean,
Nemo,
I know what Nemo was because I worked on it, but tell everyone else what Nemo was because they probably don't know.
It's been away for a number of years. Yeah, you're right. Nemo was Rick's hobby horse, and it was Rick's passion project, and it focused on...
That, by the way, that's not an image I need in my head of Rick on a hobby horse. I'm just saying.
All right, well, edit that out.
Hey, thanks for that.
Also,
now I got that stuck in my head.
Also, now we're going to have to put a pop-up in about what a hobby horse is.
It was Rick's passion project, shall we say.
Okay.
Focusing primarily on vintage cartooning from like late 19th century into, say, mid 20th century, specialized in that era.
Okay.
Primarily newspaper cartooning. But it reintroduced a lot of lost names to a new readership and a new generation. So
sure.
It was a very important, very valuable magazine. It stopped after 30 some odd issues. Rick and I stayed in touch after that and talked about what we would like to see in a magazine that nobody was doing. I guess the madness overcame us and we decided to do it ourselves. So in 1994, we launched Hogan's Alley #1. It's never gotten easier. It's really a hard job.
You make it sound so fun.
I've never wanted to stop challenging myself with what I do with it. I never wanted to start going through the motions. So I always make it harder than it has to be.
Wow, that seems like a bad plan. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and as I get older, I think I probably should have taken the easy way out. But we have done some really interesting stuff in it. I think people have really responded to it. They only come out with about one issue a year. With the pandemic, it's not even been that. I'm working right now on issue 23. Our readers, God bless them, are very patient. They know that when it happens, it's going to be worth the wait. Stay with us. They stick with us. It's basically my way of exploring comics in a way that I think it deserves to be explored, underexplored areas of cartooning, people whose stories have not been told in a way that I have wanted them told. Let me reach over here.
Well, there's not a lot of access anywhere else. Look at that, an Eisner Award.
2016, Eisner Award, Best Comics Magazine.
Now we have that in common. I created the Eisner Award, and you won an Eisner Award.
When we were nominated the first time in 2016, I look back on it now, it was so stupid. I didn't attend because I thought, there's no way in hell we win this. It's our first time.
I remember sitting there watching him announce your name, and I was like, oh, he's not here. Oh, no.
I did not think there was any chance I would win, and I should have been there, but, you live and you learn. Yeah, it's really been a fun ride, and we've done some great stuff. And I know you guys have read the magazine, so.
Mr. Mason, you just had a question.
I have lots of questions now.
Oh yeah, well go, man, go. You're way more versed about newspaper strips than I am because you were almost in that world, right? I mean,
well, and I know a lot of people who are in that world, and so it's my one half claim to fame. I used to go out to lunch with Orlando Bucino and Jerry Marcus, and a guy named V. Gene Myers, and sometimes Sam Gross would drop in.
Wow.
I knew a bunch of guys, and I have a bunch of stories that I can't tell. But the name Hogan's Alley actually comes from a comic strip, right?
Yes, that is where the Yellow Kid is sort of our unofficial mascot. Right. He's been on the cover of every issue. He has the advantage of being recognizable in public domain.
Wow, those are two good characteristics.
Yeah, tough to beat. So his antics all took place in Hogan's Alley.
I see. Okay.
The fireworks in Hogan's Alley, the dog parade in Hogan's Alley. So that was his, the universe that R.F. Outcall, his creator, brought to life in that strip. Back when it was one full page, back when the papers were gigantic, it was this epic scene filled with detail, and he always had that night shirt with the caption on the front with a different message every week. But so we both wanted a connection to the earliest days of he wasn't the first American comic strip. A lot of people have that misconception, but he was the first character to really become a mainstream phenomenon.
Right.
And started doing a lot of merchandising and gave rise to that whole.
He's the gateway to Buster Brown.
Precisely.
I'm wearing my Yellow Kid underoos right now.
Is there a message on them that you want to read to us?
I could, but then I would get defunded by YouTube. So I would love to.
So anyway, with sort of co-opting the Yellow Kid, we wanted a connection to the earliest days of when American cartooning really became a mainstream form of entertainment.
Right.
With the growth of the newspapers and then syndication that made it affordable for papers anywhere to have a decent comics page, because with syndicates, there was a tremendous appetite for content.
Right.
What we now would call content.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the Netflix of the 1920s, is that what you're saying?
Right. It was just
right.
Every town had 2 and 3 papers. And you see a lot of the comics pages now from the, teens and 20s, and some of it's great and some of it's, you look at it and you say, did somebody think this was a professional effort? It's just, right. It looks so slapdash and half-assed.
Well, certainly comic books have gone through its fair share of periods like that as well.
Sure. I guess any medium kind of finding its footing has that sort of experimental phase where there's a land rush,
Right.
Everybody's trying to get a piece and grab the brass ring. So you have a lot of, we tend to remember the brilliant innovations and the geniuses. You forget the misfires, but there were a lot. Right. There were a lot of misfires.
Not everybody was Winsor McKay or George McManus.
Exactly. You don't come across a Milton Caniff every day.
Right.
I mean, back in the day, people would buy the paper to read Alley-Oop or Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates. That's what they would. That was the destination strip back then. And if there was something else on the page you would also get exposed to, that was it would. A rising tide lifted all boats.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
But back then it was the same sort of thing that we're in now, where the licensing and merchandising was also a huge part of the comic strip world. You'd have Buster Brown shoes, and you'd have Terry and the Pirates Big Little books, and you'd have toys and games and stuff that was all based on comic strips in the newspaper. And this goes back to the 1910s and 1920s, right?
Yeah. And you had really weird things, like the Yellow Kid was a kid, right there in his name, selling like tobacco products and cigars.
Right.
So it was kind of a crazy marriage of character and message. But you had Andy Gump selling cigars and cigarettes and anything that people would buy. There was a comics character, and cartoonists themselves were celebrities back then, and they were supposed to be. Claire Briggs, a name few people recognize today, was a superstar, and he sold lots of products just by being Claire Briggs.
It's weird that the solitary business of a person just sitting in their studio drawing a cartoon would suddenly become also a celebrity spokesman. It'd be like Gary Larson advertising for Lucky Strikes, or Bill Watterson brand water or something.
The idea of a cartoonist who has one of the supremely isolating professions, puts himself out there every day and bears his soul to his readers and shares his insights with readers in his way of looking at the world. And it's a really strange dynamic of the isolated cartoonists, many of whom are very introverted people, being out there for the world to see, and feeling like they have a relationship with every day.
Well, the weirdest to me was always Charles Schulz, because he's very quiet, he's very introspective, he just wanted to do his comic strip, but oh, by the way, here's some life insurance. Yeah. And so
yeah, I mean, he was one of the titans of merchandising, as you still see today.
So I have a couple of questions I've been dying to ask. I love Winsor McCay's artwork. Why can't he letter?
I want to say he's one of the world's worst letterers. But if you look at his editorial cartoons, of which there are plenty, if he's doing like the word as a graphic element built into his strip, like truth or whatever,
justice,
like that,
or
it's marvelous. It's spectacular.
Yes.
So he was able to treat letter forms with great skill. If you look at his strip, it curls up the corner of the word balloon, and Little Nemo is, obviously the word balloons were a total afterthought for him. The bottom line doesn't quite have enough room, and there's that weird dialogue his character has, so they're going, oh, and the spacing is all weird.
Every time one of his letters crashes into the word balloon border, I just freak out of like, wait, hold it, that can't be right.
It's like,
and every other aspect is so meticulous and so magnificent.
Yeah.
It's like he drew the thing and was proud of it, and then he left the room, and then some kids came in with some stickers and some crayons and just said, oh, I can letter this for my dad. And then it's off-putting. I want to read the strip, but I don't read it as much as I just want to look at it.
Yes, it's hard to reconcile how we could be such a peerless craftsman with that crappy lettering.
He had to have hung out with other cartoonists, and he had to have hung out with other guys. And why doesn't George McManus just call him up and say, look, love the work, but your letter form is terrible, man.
Between the strips and the animation and editorial cartoons, his output was just staggeringly prodigious. He was obviously able to do tons of great work, but he did not give a crap about lettering. It's clear.
Yeah, because then there's a guy like George Harriman who works it in as an element of his art.
Right.
And plays with the form, plays with the balloons, plays with the structure of the page, and makes it all part of it. And then there's this sort of slapdash thing from McCay where it's just, I'll just put some letters here.
Forget about
it. Forget about it.
Well, because the newspaper used to be the size of a sofa.
Yeah.
And you would open it up, and you would see, this giant full-page Hal Foster, Prince Valiant, and a Winsor McKay strip or a Cliff Sterrett, Polly and Her Pals, and they'd be the size of yoga mats.
Yes.
And in beautiful color. It's sort of stunning. And I always thought that if I had a time machine, I would like to have a couple of Sunday papers where I had that experience of being a kid in the 20s or 30s where I could just, on Sunday morning, I could open up my paper.
Yes.
And just, boom, there it is.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, those I'll call it yellow K pages, you look at them and they're magnificent. They're huge. And like you said, the color is just stunning. It used to be the libraries held physical newspaper archives. Right. But over the years, they've gotten rid of pulped or gotten rid of their archives in some way.
Bastards.
I know it's unthinkable.
Is it like the old TV shows where some of that stuff just doesn't exist anymore? That you couldn't find it no matter how hard you tried.
I mean, that's why we all need to bow down to Bill Blackbeard because he.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah. No. They should.
He did so much.
In Burbank, there shouldn't be a statue of Batman. There should be a statue of Bill Blackbeard.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, put down your drinks for a second. I got to interrupt the show. Bill Blackbeard and his wife founded the nonprofit San Francisco Academy of Comic Art in 1968, with part of the funds coming from the sale of their only car. His astonishing collection of comic strips and cartoon art from newspapers included 2.5 million clippings, tear sheets, and comic sections dating from 1894 to 1996. Bill Blackbeard provided his clippings to publishers that were interested in reprinting newspaper comic strips for historical purposes and to introduce the strips to new audiences. Tom and Dave published many comic book collections of the comic strips sent by Bill Blackbeard, including Sherlock Holmes, The Shadow, Charlie Chan, and others. He even has his own comic book entitled Bill Blackbeard, the Collector Who Rescued the Comics. He wrote, edited, and contributed to more than 200 different books on cartooning and newspaper strips. When the Academy of Comic Art lost its lease in the late 90s, it took 6 semi-trailer trucks to move the collection to Ohio State University. The total weight of his preserved strips and cartoons, 75 tons. Blackbeard once said, "Only the tasteless and the uninformed consider comic art trivial." Everyone here at Geekview Tavern wanted to use this opportunity to say thanks to Bill Blackbeard, a real-life superhero, for the art of cartoons and comics. Thanks, Bill.
All hail Bill.
He's intricately saving newspapers, and he's clipping them out of the newspaper and saving them in little envelopes. It's like a madman, but
this is what people had to do to get the work out there. You send your clipped strips because there was no other way.
How has the technology made it easier for Hogan's Alley over the years, or does it just make it more difficult to have to scan and clean it up?
It's so much easier. My art director, David Folkman, I want to make sure to mention David Folkman because Hogan's Alley would not be viable without him. When we started doing Hogan's Alley in the early 90s, I will say there wasn't desktop publishing software. There probably was, but we were doing paste ups with the wax machine and the roller. You remember that?
I do remember that.
We've all been in that room, buddy.
I have a box of those supplies still.
Yeah, it was state of the art. Yeah, so anyway, we were sending paste up boards back and forth with party mail boxes to California and to Atlanta. And
sure,
I was mailing him, CD-ROMs or back then floppy disks that we had that I put stuff on for him for text. But it was nuts. Now, Dropbox, WeTransfer or whatever like that. It's boom. Yeah. It's so much easier.
What are you reading now in the newspaper? Anything? And what newspapers exist?
A newspaper? What are you talking about?
For me, newspaper cartooning sort of had a break-off point when Bill Watterson retired, Gary Larson retired, and then Burt Breathitt retired.
Burt Breathitt, I knew you were going to say that. I'm friends with a lot of cartoonists. I think there's a lot of good cartooning still going on. I think it's a very, very tough climate. The economic model that has worked so well for so long has been upended. I did a roundtable with cartoonists who were kids and grandkids of cartoonists like Greg and Brian Walker, Chris Brown, Mason Mastroianni, who is Johnny Hart's grandson. Guys like that. Oh, and Jeff Keane, who is Bill Keane's son,
right?
Who's doing the Family Circus. And I was talking to them about what it was like to work in the industry, having come into the business and taken over the family business. I always remember something Jeff Keane said, which is, it's not fair, but it's not wrong. And I always thought that was a great way to put it. You know, he it's not like he controlled his fate. You know, he was just born into a good situation. For people who don't have that luck of birth, it's tough. I asked all of them, would you counsel your own kids to go into this field? And then there was like a painful 10-second silence.
Yeah, right.
Because it's not an industry you encourage people to go into, you know, make an easy living. Or used to be, if you got a syndicated strip, even if you were only a modest success, you could do very well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore. It's very tough. We ran in an early issue of Hogan's Alley. Fortune magazine did a thing about cartoonist salaries.
Right.
And for everybody from, you know, Milton Caniff, Rube Goldberg, you know, down to names like Harry Hill, who did the Bungle Family. They gave their annual incomes, and if you adjust them for inflation, even a guy who only had a moderately successful strip was still well into the six figures.
Yeah.
$200,000 in today's dollars easily. Those days are gone. I know I'm dancing around your question of what strips do I read. I still read a lot of, I subscribe to both of the services from Universal Press and King Features. Every day I get lots of strips. I look at almost all of them that they offer just to keep abreast of what's out there and to see what's new. There's still a lot of good work being done, and it's really painful that they just don't have the audience that they used to.
I like that the new person on Nancy, Olivia James, is taking that is not necessarily continuing the old Nancy, but trying to find a way to connect with anybody who might be reading comics now. And I like the way that they rebooted Mark Trail. And
yes,
you know, and brought in. We'll have to use a pop-up when I remember who it is.
Yeah.
But I like the way that they took out the stodgy 1950s Mark Trail and are at least trying to make it contemporary. And I like what Curtis and Joe Staton are doing with Dick Tracy. It feels like people are still trying.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And, you know, Olivia James, you cited a great example. She's very polarizing. I think that cartooning has to evolve like any creative form. It has to change with the times and evolve to a new audience. And I love Bushmiller. I've always loved Bushmiller, but I'm the first to admit that, you know, Bushmiller is not exactly contemporary.
Well, I look at it as almost like Batman. Like the Batman of the 1930s is different from the Batman of 1966 that was on TV, which is different from the Tim Burton Batman, which is also different from the Bruce Timm animated Batman. So there's tons of different Batmans, and there just happen to be two Nancy. So I think the culture can still survive. So,
but anyway, you asked about Hogan's Alley, and I wanted to mention one thing in the new issue. Well, no, not
there we go.
Most recent issue. This piece about Al Capp is a piece that was probably 10 years in the making. I touched base with Gene Kilborn, who is a very well-known, respected filmmaker and author specializing in women's depictions in advertising and various media. And I read that she had worked for Al Capp early in her career. And I thought, oh, that's neat. Let's hear about her time working for Al Capp. And I knew, you know, Al Capp's reputation. So I got in touch with Gene and I said, hey, I'd love to have you write something about Hogan's Alley about your time with Al Capp. And she was very gracious, got back to me and said, thanks for asking, but he sexually harassed me and it's too painful for me to revisit. So I'd rather not go there.
Oh, no.
I said, I understand. I respect that.
Sure.
You know, totally get it. But, you know, if you ever change your mind, door's always open. And then the Me Too thing happened.
Yeah.
And she said, then I have to tell my story. I'm not being true to myself if I don't tell my story about Me Too. It resulted in this article. She went into her own archives, her own diaries, sent me photos from that period of her life. But literally, we started talking about this piece probably over a decade ago.
Yeah.
And it finally saw print in Hogan's Alley 22. So.
And you're still working on 23, right?
Working on 23 now, yes.
Okay,
and,
good, good.
Have content planned for 24 and beyond. So.
And you're gonna send me this. You're gonna send me the information so I can put it in the comments, and I can put it on at the end of this video, right? About how to contact you, how they can get their own copies of Hogan's Alley, all that stuff, right?
I'm not the world's best marketer, but that's an offer even I won't pass up.
Aw, well,
well, you'll be our hobby horse then, and we'll just keep bugging you until.
Hobby horse. What's up?
I love how you brought that full circle, Mr. Tom. That was
Grandpa.
great.
Yeah, I keep notes. I know it doesn't look like it, but I am actually paying attention.
I'll drink to that.
Thank you.
This has been a sheer delight. It's great to catch up with you guys.
Same here.
Right.
Take care, everyone.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
If you would like a half-price sample copy of Hogan's Alley magazine, here's the info, but it's also in the comments section. Share this video with friends, hit the like button, and please subscribe. Also in the comments, more info about the astonishing accomplishments of Bill Blackbeard. Now order yourself a refreshment, tip your waiter, and check out other Geek View Tavern videos. Thanks for visiting Geek View Tavern. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified. Come back soon.